Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Nerds Only podcast. You're here today with your hosts, Elijah, that's me,
and Josiah, who's me.
We have no idea what we're doing. Let's get into the episode. Judge, are you going to tell everybody what we're talking about today?
Today, we're going to be talking about media and storytelling specifically. When I say media, I mean like book writing, video games, and movies. Which media has the best format for storytelling? We're going to talk about pros and cons, stuff like that. And personally, I've been trying to figure this out for myself because I want to be a storyteller and I need to figure out which kind of form of media I'm going to choose.
I already know 100%. I think I've said it on multiple of these podcasts already, which, you know, we'll get there when we get there, but hands down, I already know. But let's take a minute and let's just talk about the big three: books, movies, and video games. Let's start with books. I feel like that's the oldest of the three.
Yes, definitely.
Let's just kind of talk about some of our favorite novels, what we like that they actually do well.
So, something that books manage to capture is the character in a way, because it lets you see into the character's thoughts. And I think a really good book that does this is, recently I've been reading through Pride and Prejudice, and I think it does a very good job of capturing kind of the character's emotions and feelings in a way that a movie or a video game might not be able to as well. You can really understand the character because it's being thoroughly explained. It's not too much up to interpretation as it is just this is how it's going and this is how you understand it.
Yeah, for sure. I think this is a period of like most people's lives where they just like that you're in right now, and I hope you stay in, where you hit this point when you're a teenager, a young adult, where you just like really get into books. Like you're just like reading. It's all you can do. It's all you can think about. And then you get a little older and you just kind of stop, which is a little sad. I love books. I have probably read a couple hundred novels in my life, but the older I get, the harder it is for me to actually stay interested. Like the last book I've read is To Sleep in a Sea of Stars. It is a sci-fi series written by Christopher Paolini. He's the author who wrote The Inheritance Cycle, so the Aragon books. It's a dang good book. But I've also been reading it on and off for like 2.5 years now. Mm-hmm. I'll pick it up, I'll read a couple chapters, I'll put it down, and then months later I'll, maybe read a couple pages, maybe a couple extra chapters than normal, but it's very inconsistent, which to me I think is it's something that makes me a little sad because it's such an amazing form of storytelling. Like you said, Josiah, there's no way that a movie or video game could do as well at letting us into what the character is thinking. Mm-hmm. So what are a couple other books or book series that you really enjoy?
So what I'm reading through right now actually is Brandon Sanderson's Stormlight Archives. Brandon Sanderson has this whole like Cosmere, a whole thing. But anywho, the Stormlight Archives is like his crown jewel of the book series, in my opinion. And one of the characters there is Kaladin, and Kaladin like hits rock bottom, and he's like going through a bunch of depression and a bunch of it deals with like suicide and things like that, and it just feels very real. It feels like I'm reading about a real person. Like it's not like, it's almost like I'm there, if that makes sense. I don't know. It's very draws me in a lot. It's very immersive. It feels like I understand the character from head to toe. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I don't know. It's no books are immediately jumping into mind because I haven't read anything too much lately. As a kid, I read like Hunger Games, Divergent, all those kind of dystopian novels that kids read Harry Potter. So right now I'm much more into classical literature, but storytelling wise, I just feel like, yeah, books just let you see into the character in a way that other media can't.
Yeah, and I think something that novels do really well that I think the other two types of media that we're talking about today do is that you can just do it, you know?
I myself am writing a book series.
Yeah, you can just sit down and you can just write. And don't get me wrong, I'm not trying to say writing a book is easy or that it's easier than making a video game or making a film. But you can just sit down. All you need is Word, or if you can't afford Word, you just need Google Docs, which is free. And you just sit and you write. And then, hopefully you can get a publishing deal, but if you can't, you can self-publish it. Like you have options that you don't really have with video games or films. And again, video games, you can self-publish as well. You need to know how to code. You need to know how to animate. Like there's a lot more. Again, not that writing a book is easy, but there's a lot more of a learning curve in terms of just knowing how to use the software. There are different video game engines that you need to learn. You got to decide what you want to build that on, and there's just a lot to it. And then film, man, I love film, but it is incredibly hard to do by yourself. There are a couple films. What was that Bo Burnham film?
Inside. It was on
Inside.
Netflix.
Yes. He wrote, produced, did, as far as I know, he did everything himself. But that is not a regular. That is the exception to the rule. Most films, you need at least a small crew because you want your director. You need someone on camera. You need someone running audio. And yes, technically you can do these things yourself, but it's so incredibly difficult. And so I love that with novels, you can just sit down and you can just write. And I think that's amazing.
Yeah, one of the things that disappoints me most is because I have this like cool idea of how I could make this super cool video game where I have to put the players in this super difficult situation, or a movie where it's so like beautiful and breathtaking that it'll just provide a whole new sense of some subject or thing that I'm trying to discuss with the viewer. Mm-hmm. But I can't do that alone. And especially at this time in my life right now, it's very hard to find people to share that passion with who would even want to go so far as to do something like that or learn those things and work together on it. So it's always very refreshing knowing that when I have an amazing book idea or amazing character idea, I can do it. Yeah. I don't have to wait till I'm out in college and know about coding or filming or all these things. I know that I can just sit down at my desk, set aside a few hours, and just brainstorm. And then once I'm done brainstorming, I actually like write it out and edit it and do everything by myself, because it's very much about the things going on in my own head. And it's almost freeing in a way. You don't have to rely on the ideas of others or what they think would be best. Mm-hmm. It's all up to you, and you get to tell the story that you want to tell with no boundaries at all.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that something that is amazing about books is just like, this depends on the author. There are some, really bad authors out there who aren't necessarily the best, but the really good authors can just bring you into the world. They're so descriptive on what's there, and they just make you feel like you're actually a part of it with just words, and that's amazing. And I think there are other authors that, I think it's like with that, it's kind of a spectrum. Like on one end, you have authors who aren't very descriptive. It's a lot to your imagination. And then you have J.R.R. Tolkien, who tells you about the leaves on the trees.
Yeah.
It's a big, like I said, a spectrum. And I just love that with novels because you do get such variety.
It really is just whatever you want. And you can go as in detail as you want or be as vague as you want. It really depends on what message you're trying to tell and how you're trying to tell it. The coolest experiences is when it doesn't even feel like I'm reading a book. Mm-hmm. I'm reading the words on the page, but it does feel like I'm there. I remember, I think Maze Runner was like the first big series that I ever read, even before Harry Potter, possibly. Mm-hmm. Anywho, it felt like I was there. I'm not sure why. I don't even remember if it was like that great of a book. but I just remember feeling like I was there with Thomas in that cage, surrounded by these walls, and just the element of mystery and what's going on. And it just felt so invigorating, I guess. I felt excited and I wanted to learn more. And the payoff is very, very amazing whenever you've read this huge behemoth of a book like Lord of the Rings or something like that, and you get to the end of the story and it's amazing. And you know all the things to be known and the characters have gone through their journey. You almost feel like you yourself has grown as a person, not just the characters in the book. You've learned new things. You understand aspects about life that you didn't before. And it's a very encouraging experience whenever you finish a good book, because you feel changed. Maybe not a lot, but in a little way, something about you changed after reading that.
Yeah. Yeah. Something I think that books do really well is serialization. Because it's just one person, and usually there's not like this big multimedia organization funding it and as such needing to be paid back. They can they can take their time and they can make their series good. Now, I'm not saying every novel series is good. I've read some that have had some pretty big stinkers or pretty bad endings, but I don't know. I think that's, as a creative, that is more freeing. You can kind of just take your time. Look at George R.R. Martin. When are we getting the last of his books? I don't know, but we will. I really think we will. You know, while with films and video games, a lot of times you have, like I said, there are these corporations that want to be paid, and so they rush things and they make bad group decisions that really hurt it. And then so you end up having games like Halo, really good, 1 through 3, but they just really haven't felt like they've had an identity, you know. Or Cyberpunk 2077, to be clear on the Halo comment, the later games 4 through Infinite, I feel like they've had an identity struggle. Or Cyberpunk 2077 definitely needed another year or two before coming out. Film series, I'm trying to think, something that's been very clearly rushed. The DCEU, they didn't have a plan. A lot of the movies were rushed. They just wanted to get things out, and now look, they're completely restarting it. So as an author, I think novels give you a lot more freedom too than other storytelling methods do.
Yes, and it's a lot easier to make changes as well. Like, if you've already spent the hours and hours coding and voice acting and all these things for games or movies, sometimes it's too late to change things, and it's like, we just got to go with it.
Yeah.
I feel like with writing, it's like, if you have this amazing idea that would work so much better in the book, it doesn't take that much reworking as it does for other media.
No, like with gaming, this is something I've heard from game devs. You go and you change something at the end. Well, it doesn't just change the thing at the end. It could mess up something from like 10 hours earlier in the game, you know, like, or a whole different level somehow gets changed. So there's some danger in adding or changing things there. Not that it's going to like destroy the project, but it might delay it some. Mm-hmm. Or with films, like when you get on that film set that day, yeah, sometimes you can get a reshoot, but most of the time, typically, you're just like, we get what's on camera, and you can't really change what you film.
Yeah.
What happens that day, what gets recorded is what gets recorded. So yeah, novels really come with a lot of freedom. Mm-hmm. But does that necessarily mean they're the best storytelling device?
That is where my problem is because it very much relies on the reader. Mm-hmm. It's so easy to read an amazing book with a terrible mindset.
Yeah.
I read through The Hobbit on my own time, and I loved it. Mm-hmm. But I had to read Lord of the Rings for school, and I hated it. Just the Fellowship of the Ring. If you don't take the time to enjoy it and be there, it's like terrible.
Yeah.
And so it's much more difficult to enjoy books sometimes if you're not prepared to read it, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And I think something else is like, on that point of being in the right mindset, like video games, you can just hop on.
Yeah.
Just play around a Fortnite or Call of Duty or whatever. You don't necessarily have to really be invested. A movie, yeah, you can be invested, or you can look at memes while it plays in the background.
Yeah.
Something you can't really do while reading.
Yeah.
You've got to be focused on it. And I think as such, you need to be like really into it.
Mm-hmm.
You've got to want to, or it's not going to happen.
Yeah. That's why reading for school is terrible. All the books that we've read, like if I just went back and read on my own time, I think I would love. But I hate seeing that, like, oh, you got to read 6 chapters by tomorrow. And it's like, well, now I don't want to read the chapters because it's so many. And it's like, sure, the details are amazing, but it's not enjoyable because I'm feeling like I'm having to rush because I have so much to do. And I can't truly sit down and enjoy it. And it just, yeah, it really is the focus. You have to be 100% there to really get the book. Mm-hmm. And that can be difficult sometimes to just, that's why I've kind of grown out of reading, and I'm trying to get back into it by forcing myself to read a chapter a night, things like that.
Which then the forcing yourself is like we talked about. It's all about being in the right mindset, right? Which, you know, it's a blessing and a curse because you have to be so focused. It can be really hard if you're not into it. But also, if you're into it, it's good.
Yeah.
It's real good.
I love reading at school because I have a serious problem with procrastinating, especially at school. They're like, okay, you have 30 minutes to work on work. And I'm like, nah, I don't really want to. And at least when I read a book, it feels like I'm getting at least something done, something productive. And since I'm already in a focused mindset at school, it's like I'm not in the classroom, and it allows me to actually decompress there. I'm in a different world with these characters experiencing super cool things, super fun and cool things. And it's relaxing, and I don't know. If you get into it, you get into it. Mm-hmm. And it really is amazing.
Yeah. Shall we move on to talking about films?
Yeah, you can go ahead.
Films, freaking awesome.
Films are amazing.
I don't know. I think something they do really well is like, and we'll lump TV into this as well, more like as a non-active visual media. Mm-hmm. And I specify non-active because you can just sit and watch, while I would consider gaming active visual media because you have to actually like be playing. With films and TV, like, it's just stunning. Like, making a film is an art in itself. Like, there's so much that goes into making a good film, and bad films too, but so much into making a good film, and like so many people that have to do their jobs well, so many people that have to like care about the project for it to actually be good, because you can really tell the difference between a team that really cares about what they're making versus a team that's just there because that's their job. Mm-hmm. You know, or like if it's a adaptation of a video game or a book or something, there's a big difference between the team that loves the source material versus the team that doesn't really understand the source material. But really, films are just so visually stunning. I mean, even since the start of films, they've always just like captivated people with their visuals. And, you know, I think as we're moving on from novels, like, it's not just visually appealing. There's also the narrative, of course, that we get with novels, but then there's also a sound section of it that just, it all comes together to make something really, really amazing.
Yeah. Another big thing for me is pacing. Mm-hmm. In a book, these big moments happen, but it's all happening at the same speed because you're the one reading it. But with like movies, specifically, I remember this one part from a show that came out fairly recently, Cyberpunk 2077, like the anime on Netflix.
Yeah.
There's this part where I think it's Rebecca's brother. He's killed, and then like everything slows down and changes color. Mm-hmm. And it's like, if you're invested in the show, of course, it's like, oh my gosh, I can't believe that just happened. And then you sit there for a few minutes, like thinking, it allows you to think about what's just happened. How is this going to affect the people around? How is it going to affect the main character? And it's like slowly showing shots of like blood and then the characters' faces and like the reactions happening. And it allows you a second to take everything in. And then it just everything happens all at once. They all start running, they all start shooting, and you're like, oh my gosh, this is insane. And it like almost grabs your attention in a way that books can't.
Yeah.
So it just, pacing is a big thing for me, and the visuals are so amazing. There's so many parts in movies, like in Your Name, not Your Name, A Silent Voice.
Silent Voice.
A Silent Voice. Oh, I love that film. There are like moments where it's just, there's no words spoken. It's only facial expressions or like wide shots, but it's just so breathtaking, and you just feel the sense of understanding almost, or like just, I don't know how to describe it, but it's, you watch these things happen with nothing really happening. No words telling you what's going on, just the screen and what's being presented.
Yes. And that's literally something that books can't do.
Yeah.
You literally can't, like, again, I love books, but like it's so dependent on the actual written words that it literally is impossible to tell a story without words through a novel. But with films and video games, you get this opportunity as a storyteller to use colors, facial animations, just random sound effects. It could be the wind whistling or a train in the background or crickets or whatever. Like, there's so much that you can use, and you're actually encouraged to use in addition to words and dialogue. And I just think that's really awesome.
Yeah, I don't know. It definitely, character movement is one thing as well. In books, all I can really say is like he walked boastfully sometimes. Sometimes they'll go real in depth about how they would specifically move parts of the body or something like that. But it's like with TV shows and movies, you can introduce characters in such a fun and amazing way, and just like characters in general. And just facial expressions especially. For some reason, books can't capture sometimes it feels the hurt that someone feels after something being said.
Mm-hmm. And she was sad.
Yeah, and then she was sad, and her face contorted into a grimace. But actually seeing that pains you on a whole nother level.
Again, not to discredit books. There have been plenty of books that I've cried about, but
yes.
Looking into someone's eyes and seeing that they are actually in pain is very impactful.
Yeah, what always gets me, it hasn't happened a whole lot, but I just remember it always gets me is when like the character tries to pretend like they're happy, they're like smiling, but they're like crying and like hiccuping because they're trying not to sob. And books are amazing, don't get me wrong, but you can't capture that in a book. And you can't capture the tenseness of that moment or the tenseness of the character themselves. And it's a lot more impactful. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You know what I think that movies do better, hands down, no question, something that's really important to me as a consumer, better than the others? Big battles.
Oh,
big cinematic battles. I mean, come on. Helm's Deep. The battle at the end of Endgame. This one's a deep cut, but the battle at the end of Serenity. I don't know. I love seeing a big battle, which it's kind of harder to describe. Tons of books do really well at describing battles, but again, there's something about the visual aspect that really, really adds to it. And like, let's talk about the Battle of Five Armies in The Hobbit versus the Hobbit movies. It's a couple pages in the books?
Yeah, because Bilbo gets knocked out, and then he skips the whole battle. What's up with that? It's so frustrating.
But then it's almost a whole movie, which again, that comes down to Tolkien's choice to knock Bilbo out. But we were talking about pacing earlier, and that's what made me specifically think about the Hobbit, because we see such a vast difference between the book and the movie. Mm-hmm. And I personally do prefer the Hobbit book over the movies, Lord of the Rings movies over the books. Mm-hmm. But I still really enjoyed seeing the Battle of Five Armies just visually. I think we've talked about pacing. Sometimes you just need a good hour and a half to tell a story. Or sometimes, talking about TV, a good, 10 hours worth of TV episodes. But also, on the other hand, sometimes I found that movies and TV shows are either really rushed or really dragged out. So I'll give 2 examples. On the rush side, I won't spoil anything for Primal for those of you who haven't seen it, but the last episode of Primal should have been at least season 2, because who knows when you're listening to this, seasons 3, 4, 5, 1,000 might be out by this point, or maybe season 2 was the last one, but the last episode should have been at least 2 episodes, if not 3, 4, 5 episodes. Everything that happens into it is so rushed, and like I cannot recommend the show. Like, if you'd asked me before I watched the final episode, would I recommend Primal, I would have said yes, 100%. It's such a good show. And then I saw the last episode and its pacing issues, and I was like, and now I've switched because I can't justify it. I can't suggest watching a show like this because it's just so dissatisfying. Like, it made me regret watching the whole show overall. But then on the other hand, there are tons of TV shows that just they just drag on. Like Once Upon a Time. I really liked that series. I don't even know how many seasons it has now, but I can confidently say it didn't need that many. I feel like that sometimes you just need a satisfying ending, and you just need to move on, instead of like, okay, what's happening next season? I think as a viewer, it gets really discouraging when it's just like, okay, and here's a new problem, and then they solve it. Okay, here's a new problem, and then they solve it, and there's never, like, we as consumers need some sort of a conclusion eventually. Mm-hmm. But I think that's one of my biggest issues with TV and movies, and one of the best things about it is pacing. It can be really good or it can be really bad.
Yeah, good pacing can definitely make or break a show or a movie.
Also, before we move on to video games, and this will be really my final thought if you want to add anything else, stop making film and TV adaptations with teams that don't care about the source material.
Yeah, please. It hurts.
It really does. Like, I'm sure there's no chance that a big movie producer is watching this, or listening to this. But if for some chance you do, we as consumers would rather wait for the project to be done right than done by people that don't care. And I know it might be, it's so weird because they're like, because it's easier, so it might not cost as much, so it'll save money. But like, in the long run, if you make a product that's good, people are going to spend more money on it. They're gonna go see movies in theaters multiple times if they really like it. They're gonna go buy the merch. People that haven't, like, if it's a book adaptation, they'll go buy the books. If it's a video game adaptation, they'll go buy the games. Like, Cyberpunk Edge Runners saved Cyberpunk 2077. 100%. There was nowhere near as many people playing that game. But after the anime came out and people really liked it, they're like, oh, I want to give this game a try because the anime was good. Mm-hmm. Make good adaptations. Anyway, any final thoughts on films before we move on?
Yes, really, I do hate seeing, especially, I feel like Marvel lately has been falling into that trap a little bit of just putting out stuff that isn't super great, but it's good enough for people to enjoy it enough to maybe go see the next one. Mm-hmm. I personally don't think I'm going to watch any more Marvel movies as of right now. Because I'm hearing not so great things about Ant-Man and Quantumania, which at this time is the newest Marvel movie that's come out. Anywho, yeah, it's so much better when there's love and effort put into it.
Yeah, I completely agree. And maybe, I think we've had talks. Maybe for our next one, we'll dive deep into Marvel, because I don't fully agree or disagree with your statement. There have been some really good projects and there have been some really bad ones, but we'll definitely have to dive into like a Marvel specific episode for that.
Definitely.
Because I don't want to get on an hour long tangent.
Full on argument.
Nah, we'd keep it friendly.
Yeah.
I'd keep it friendly.
No, I'm gonna be screaming at you. Oh, Marvel Studios. No, please. I'm sorry.
Video games.
Video games. There's my biggest selling, because I'm not planning on filming anytime soon, because that takes a whole team of people, and high school doesn't allow that.
Yeah.
But video games, if I could learn coding right now, there's those like indie developers that make beautiful, beautiful games. Just as an example, whether you think the franchise is good or not, but like Scott Cawthon with FNAF, he just made it himself, I think. I hope I'm not wrong with that.
Yeah, at least some of the early games. I think some of the later ones he brought some people on.
Yeah.
I know for sure Security Breach was a whole studio. I don't even think he had much of a hand in that game, but
Yeah.
I think it just depends on the game. Oh, and the FNAF VR, I think, was the same studio maybe that did Security Breach.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Like FNAF 1, it was just someone sat down and just created an amazing game all by themselves. I feel like video games also provide that freedom, because
same thing with Minecraft, and that's the number one most selling game of all time. And yes, it does have a team right now, but it was just one guy at the beginning.
Yeah. So I don't know. I think I just want to put out there real quick that video games also kind of provide that freedom in creating them as books do. For bigger and larger projects, not as much. What if it's just like a simple story that you want, or maybe it doesn't have to be a simple story, but if it's like a simple plot, maybe.
Right. I mean, I think even one person can do a big plot. I think the best way to describe what you're trying to say is like, you can get FNAF had really interesting story and interesting lore. I mean, Game Theory and many other channels wouldn't have put out, probably hundreds of videos all combined, lore and theory videos, if they weren't interested in the story. But I think the big difference is like, one person isn't going to put out like a Jedi Fallen Order, like a AAA game. Like you have to have a team to get that level of visual quality. But I think one person, like, narratively could still tell just as amazing story.
Yeah. There's not any specific games that come to mind, but I feel like there is games out there that tell amazing stories that were just created by one person.
Yeah.
And I also hope to do that maybe in college, is to start working on coding and figuring that out.
Yeah.
But yeah, video games, another thing is, while books tell you like how a character feels, and that's amazing, and it provides clear like reasons for why, sometimes you don't agree, if that makes sense. You're like, that was dumb, I never would have done that.
Right.
With video games, it literally puts you in the character's shoes.
Yeah.
So it allows you to understand the character in a very specific way. Books also do that. And I'm not going to say either one does better or worse, but I feel like they both do it very specifically in different ways, if that makes sense.
Yes. And I think what's great about video games is you actually get a choice. Like, some video games are very linear. What happens in the story happens in the story. Very similar to novels and films. But there are other games that have so many different branching paths and different endings, and you actually get to be a part of that story, and you get to choose which way you want to go. And I think that's really amazing.
Yeah, Detroit Become Human, I think, is an amazing game for this kind of scenario. Just having to make all those tough decisions, it puts you in situations that you usually wouldn't put yourself in, and it allows you to learn things about yourself and learn to be like more understanding of others, if that makes sense in a way. I don't know, I feel very quick to jump to assumptions about people, if that makes sense. It almost allows a second look at certain outtakes on life.
Detroit Become Human has what, like 10 to 20 endings, I think?
Yeah, there's a lot.
Yeah, and that it's all based on like a ton of choices that you make.
Yeah.
But there are other games like the first one that comes to mind is Dead Rising 3, one of my favorite games of all time, had, I think, 5 endings, and they were all drastically different based on the choices you made through your playthrough. Yeah, I don't know. It's so cool with video games because, like, as a creator, you get to make that choice of, okay, am I going to create a linear path that tells a really compact, really, like, compelling story? Or am I going to create something that is more open with multiple different endings that my players can still get to make the choice? And yes, it may not be as, like, tight knit, but you can still tell a really powerful story through that.
Yeah, I don't know. It's almost a level of freedom in a way. While books are very much more, of course, they have to be on that linear path. Video games provide this level of freedom of choice.
Right, for the creator and the consumers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know, you can tell different stories in one game. It really just depends on what you do. I'd say that's the main selling point for video games, is that everything you do, you literally do. You're not watching someone else do it. You're making these decisions,
right.
And you have to live with them in the game or however it is, but you understand them because you're the one making it.
And some games even come with like a morality tracker. So the more good decisions you make, it tells you, oh, you're a good person. The more bad decisions you make, oh, you're a bad person. And that can affect the type of ending that you get. A game that does this really well is Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic. And instead of a morality tracker, is more of, are you on the light side or the dark side of the Force? And every choice you made impacted where you were as a Force user. And I really, really enjoyed that.
Yeah. I know... just another example, I think in Hogwarts Legacy, there's multiple endings.
Right, yeah.
It's like as soon as you use an unforgivable curse, you lose one of the endings or something like that. That's just what I've heard. I don't know if that's true or not.
Yeah, I'm not sure either. I've only done one playthrough, but that definitely could be a big part of it. And yeah, I don't know. There's so much freedom, and I'm just going to kind of get into it. I personally do believe that video games are the best form of storytelling because it has everything that the other medias have, but it also includes an interactive feature. You're actually there, you're making choices, you're doing things, you're impacting this world, and that's something that books and movies just cannot do.
Yeah.
I was streaming Skyrim like a year ago. My chat had me read them a Skyrim book at the end of every one of my streams. Like I got to play this video game where I sat and I read a book. Some were good, some were real hot doo-doo water.
Yeah.
But it has a novel. Or if you really want to get into it, there are subtitles. You're still reading, But
yeah.
And then you have one, it is visually stunning as well, but also you have cutscenes that are telling this like narrative story that can be just as compelling as any film. I think the best way to describe it is that for me, novels and films more consistently tell good stories as a whole compared to video games, because like, let's just be honest, we have a lot of games like Minecraft, Fortnite, stuff like that just don't really, like, they have a story, but it's not really that important. Or like, like the Minecraft devs have said that there is a history to the world, there is a story, but they don't add that to the game because they want players to find that out or make that decision out for themselves. It's part of the fun. So like I said, I think I think novels and films more consistently as a whole tell better stories. But I think video games hit higher highs.
Yeah.
Because there is that interactive portion to it.
I do remember this one part. Was it Jedi Fallen Order? Is that the name of the game? It's right when, spoiler warning, I guess, whenever Darth Vader, comes at the end of the game, and I was never more terrified. You've spent all this time fighting this boss that was so difficult. And then he just comes in and just kills her. And then he starts chasing after you. And it's so intense. You're like, oh my gosh. And you see all these flying debris. That's him using the force. And you're just scared out of your mind, hoping that you're going to make it out there alive. And it's like, you're in it. And it's very compelling visually. Not like, it doesn't like look good, if that makes sense, but there's just all these huge parts moving around that you're like, he's so strong.
Yeah, I mean, it does look good, but maybe not as good as like, let's say his last appearance since at the point of us recording this is Kenobi. Visually there is a difference, but it still does look good.
Yeah, when I say visually, I think more of colors wise.
Gotcha. Yeah,
it's like it's all gray. It's all just material. Whenever I think of good visuals, I guess I think of like the green grass, the golden sky,
That is true, but also it comes down to like the emotions. I think in that moment specifically, like the gray and the like darker colors, I think really help set the tone that like this isn't a good situation. Our boy Cal Kestis is not safe right now.
He could very much die.
He's not in a field, laying in the clouds. Or laying in the grass, looking at the clouds with the love of his life. He's in Fortress. Oh,
it's like under the ocean, though.
Yes, Inquisitorius, Fortress Inquisitorius. Literally, probably the most dangerous place for a Jedi to be.
Yeah, he's got Darth Vader chasing him.
He's got Darth Vader chasing him.
I literally have never felt more scared in a video game, even playing through Subnautica.
Yeah, and on that, like, horror as a genre, I don't overall really like, but that's because I can't really speak on novels because I've never read a scary novel or a horror novel, but I really don't like horror films because, and I've said this before, I'll say this again, I don't find them scary, and so to me, like, I feel like they fundamentally fail at what they're supposed to do. Like, most of the time I'm mad because I'm like, well, they only died because they were stupid. Like,
yeah,
that wasn't very common sense of you. But in a video game, I'm the one making those choices.
And it's so much like with a movie, there's that sense of comfort in that whatever is going to happen is going to happen. Sure, that jump scare is going to come. Oh, that's so gross. But you're sitting there. You're not in it. You're just observing. In a video game, you're like, I swear if he jumps around this corner, it's you're in it and it's you being scared. And usually you're playing a horror game alone and it's not, you're actually participating. It's not you observing and like, man, this would be such a sucky situation to be in. It's more of, man, I hate that I'm in this situation, that this character's in this situation.
Yeah, and like your actions have consequences. Like we were talking about FNAF earlier. If you die, you have to start over on night 1.
Oh, yeah.
And I think.
Not for the first FNAF games, at least.
Not for the first FNAF game. Don't listen to me. I've never said anything right in my life.
Yes, you have. Yes, you have.
Or like roguelike games. You die, you start over from the beginning. The one that really gets to me, gets under my skin.
Hades?
No, I love Hades. Star Fox 64, which I don't even know if you'd consider that a roguelike, but if you die, you start all the way at the beginning and have to start all the way over. And it's not like in Hades, at least you're making progress, like you collect whatever there is to buy better materials or whatever. Like typically there's some sort of upgrading feature. Nah, Star Fox 64, you go in the same every time.
Get good.
Get good or die. I don't know. We're talking about like emotions and stuff. I think video games just do so much more. You connect more because you're actually doing something. You're participating. And like I personally don't see the appeal of like dating sims, but clearly they're so popular. Like clearly they're doing something right.
Yeah.
For them to be so popular. And I think it's that connection. Like you feel like you're actually doing something.
Yeah.
Like I think a lot of people are like, oh, well, I don't want to watch a rom-com, but I'll play a dating sim. Really, the only difference is in a dating sim, you're actually participating. You know, in an action movie, you're just sitting there, and it's cool to see someone, you know, shoot somebody else. But in Call of Duty, I do the shooting or get shot.
Yeah.
You know? I don't know. I just think they can connect to people and bring out a lot more emotion than films and novels can.
Most definitely. Movies encourage personal growth, you know, and books, you can see personal growth in others, and that can also be true for movies. But it's like with video games, you yourself are growing in a way. No matter what. You're always either getting worse or you're getting better.
You do be getting worse at a video game sometimes. You do be getting worse.
Oh man. But it's with stories, it really is. With books, you're observing someone else, and if you really want to go deep, you think, what would I do in this situation? Do I agree with what the character's doing? Movies, same thing, you're just observing. But video games, it really is, it forces you to ask questions if you're taking it that seriously, of course.
Yeah.
But it does force you to ask questions about, like, would I ever actually do this? What would I do in this situation? And it's very inspiring for, like, personal growth and finding out who you are as a person and what you believe on certain things in life.
Yeah. So we mentioned Hogwarts Legacy. I won't really spoil the ending of the game, but at the end of the game, you have to make a choice, and you're presented with 2 dialogue options, and you're sitting there and you're like, okay, I've got to make this choice, and there's going to be major ramifications, and I don't know. Like, the dialogue options are not descriptive enough for you to know which is the right way, the right path.
Yeah.
And it is gut-wrenching because you have to say something. You have to choose, but in that moment, you don't really know what's going to happen after you say these things, and that is just so real.
Yeah.
You make those choices. You affect the world, and it just, I don't know, it hits a lot deeper than I think movies and films do. Again, I love films, I love TV shows, I love novels. They are absolutely amazing, but there's just something video games do that I just think these other 2 medias can't.
I know it. I won't go descriptive, but I will say I got to this point through the first like 2 hours of playing Hogwarts Legacy. But there's this point, like from the beginning of the game, you're having to make a choice. There's this choice where you can either tell someone a secret or not. And it took me a good bit of time to decide, and I was sitting there, I was like, I feel like I shouldn't.
How is this going to affect me in the future?
Yeah,
right.
It's like, what if I get to the final battle and I don't have these allies because I didn't let them in on the secret? And I've been thinking about the decision a lot, because I'm like, was that really the best decision not to let them know?
Yeah.
You know, and it's just, it makes it so much more difficult, because it's not like, it's so easy to look at someone else like, oh, they probably shouldn't have done that. This is why they should have done this. Or here's what I would do in that situation. But it's like, you're going to feel the consequences. Like, instead of, you're going to get to watch someone else feel the consequences, it's you feeling the consequences. And I am not excited for it.
I think we've talked about, like, we talked about games that are just like completely open, every choice matters. And we've talked about other games where it's like super narrative and just like, what happens no matter what you do. Both are good, but I think video games as a whole is like, that falls under a spectrum, and Hogwarts Legacy kind of feels a little more like in the middle. There are choices that really matter, but overall it's a pretty set story. You know, compared to things like the Mass Effect series, which, you know, all of your choices really, really matter. You know. Anyway, we can go on and on about video games, but that is my personal belief, is that they're the best form of storytelling. I don't think it should be the only form of storytelling. I think, like we've talked about, each one has their pros and cons, but I don't know, video games just really do be hitting those highs.
Yeah, they hit different. They do. It really does provide deeper insight, I feel, than books or movies can.
Okay, sorry, I just had this thought. As a con, though, if you like movies or novels, you can sit, like, besides genres, you know, you may have like genres that you don't like, but you can really sit and watch any movie and be like, oh, that was good, or I didn't like that, or whatever. Video games, on the other hand, yes, it comes down to genre and narrative that you can decide if you like it or not, but it also has play style, you know, which can really either benefit or hurt the story. There are some games that have amazing stories that I won't play because I cannot stand their play style. Like The Witcher. I'm sorry. I've heard it's absolutely amazing. I really, I like some of the Netflix series. There are other things I was like, But, and like, I've never read the novels, but I love the lore. I've done a ton of research on the lore, but the games, I just can't get into because the play style is just not that great. And like, I'm just being honest, I might give it another try or two. But I like, so in The Witcher 3, you load into the game and you have to go to this bar and talk to people to find out some information on somebody. I did that mission like 5 to 10 times. I'd load in, I'd walk around, and I'd say, oh, this isn't fun, and I'd delete the game. And then I'd come back a few months later, I'd re-download it, walk around the bar a little bit, and then I'd delete it. I finally did get past that, and I've probably put a good 10 hours into the game now, but I'm still just like, I still just don't enjoy it, you know? But I think it has a really, really good story, but because of the play style, I'm just never going to experience that. And that's just kind of one of the cons of gaming.
Yeah, it does. A big con is that it does depend so much on all the pieces working together. If all the pieces don't fit, the whole project doesn't maybe fall apart, but it definitely doesn't reach its full potential.
Yeah.
And it just, it's rough if gameplay is not great, or even such a small thing as like enemy variety, you know, or if there's not enough weapons, really the smallest things can just change the whole experience, and it's a very tricky line to tread.
Yes. Listen, we're gonna have to have a whole conversation on enemy variety, because if you're fighting the same enemies over and over again, I can't.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Again, the whole point of this episode was talking about the narrative and stuff can really hurt your enjoyment of the story.
No, definitely. If you're not enjoying what you're doing, then the narrative doesn't matter as much anymore, because it's not fun.
Right, yeah.
And that's a big thing with video games, is that it really does have to be fun, because you are interacting. You're not observing.
Right.
And if you're not enjoying interacting, then why would you do it? Even if the story's great, you can just go watch a YouTube video over it. I don't need to experience this myself.
Which, I'm not gonna lie, is something I do a lot.
I'm trying so hard not to do that nowadays.
I know exactly what happens in The Witcher 3 because I wanted to know and I couldn't play through the game, so I went and looked it up on YouTube.
Yeah, that's like FNAF for me. I personally don't like the FNAF games when it comes to gameplay. I think it's very cool, but I've tried to play through FNAF 1 a good amount of times. I just don't really enjoy it, but I love the story, so I love the game theories over it. I'm one of those people. I really enjoy like the FNAF story and like all the aspects of the world that Scott's created, and the story. I think the storytelling's amazing, but it really is like, it's just not fun, I guess, to sit down and play that.
Yeah, for sure. Well, so I have given my thoughts on what I think is the best in terms of storytelling. How about you, JoJo? After talking about this, how you feeling?
I think it's difficult because I love books. I love the way they can help you understand characters. I love movies because the impacts that they can have. I've only ever cried at movies. I've never cried at a book, to be honest. And then video games are amazing, but it takes a level of dedication to just really sit down and play through it, especially if I haven't gotten through Elden Ring yet, because it just takes so much time to get through.
Yeah, because I mean, we're talking, you know, Elden Ring, what? To beat the game your first time, you're looking at 100 to 150 hours.
Yeah. I just don't have that time. I want to play the rest of it so badly, but I literally can't because I don't have the time.
Which, okay, sorry, on Elden Ring and narratives, like, Elden Ring has really cool lore and a really cool story, but it is presented not the best.
Yeah.
And some people, that's their jam. Like, they want to go read through the description on a cup they found to find out the story.
Yeah.
But not everybody likes that. I would guess a majority of people, that's not necessarily their jam.
Mm-hmm.
And I, and a lot of people I've talked to, have gone and looked at Elden Ring lore and story videos, but they just don't want to read the description on swords or armors, or the cup thing was mostly a joke, but I would not be surprised if you could get a cup in Elden Ring. Because that's where a lot of the story is, and a lot of it's like just like talking to people and like putting together the things that different people have said, and that's really cool. That's a really cool way to tell a story, but I don't think it's the most efficient way.
Yeah.
But again, that's not really a way that films or novels can.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. It's a lot of variety. Anyway, final thoughts. Your favorite storytelling devices.
I'll say the easiest one to tell stories in is novels, is what I'll say. I think movies are amazing. I don't really have a special one for them, but if done perfectly, video games, I feel like, are the best.
Yeah.
I feel like they have the best impact, the best way to understand the characters, the best way to understand yourselves.
Mm-hmm.
And I really feel that if a video game's done perfectly, like if it's truly enjoyable, it truly has great story, great characters, all that good stuff, it's the best experience you can get from media, storytelling wise.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think that's where we're going to end it today. We will see you guys later.
See ya.